Hi, this is Rob. Welcome to the Fundraising Bright Spots podcast. This time, if your charity raises funds with major donors, I know you're going to find this one really interesting. It's with a very smart fundraiser named Debbie Johnson, who is Head of Major Gifts at the Wildlife Trust's charity in the UK. Debbie came on our Major Gifts Mastery programme about 18 months ago, and she's been absolutely flying ever since. In the interview, she shares various insights she gained from the course and how she's used them to transform high-value income for her charity.
You're taking somebody on a journey, and the donor, the person, generally, once you've got them engaged with your cause, they want to be taken on that journey and they want to see things sort of from the ground upwards in our case.
I'm very, very delighted to say that young couple now have been such significant donors that their collective donations have now surpassed 7 figures.
I remember years ago reading in a book, and it resonated with me so much I wrote it down. It said, "He or she who hesitates waits and waits and waits." And it really pained me to think of various times in my life up to that point where I talked myself out of doing the thing that really just made sense to do. Hello Debbie, welcome to the podcast.
Hi Rob, good to be here. Thanks for asking me.
You're so welcome. I really enjoyed the chance to get to know you a little bit when you were on our course, and then you and I had a really good catch up a week or two ago, and that's when I realised there's just some interesting things that our podcast listeners might benefit from hearing. But before we get into all of that, what's the charity you work for and what's your role?
I work for the Wildlife Trusts. People may know that the Wildlife Trusts are a central team where I'm placed, and then we have 46 independent trusts around the country, all independent charities. But at the central team, we facilitate a lot of work for the trusts around the organisation, and I specifically work for the central team and I head the Major Gifts.
And as far as I can remember, when you came on our Major Gifts Mastery Programme 18 months or so ago, you had already had a successful career commercially, and I don't know how many months you'd been working in the charity sector, but I wonder if you could give us a tiny bit of context for when you joined the programme, and then we'll go on to see how that paid off for you, and then in particular some of the techniques that you found helpful.
Yeah, you're exactly right. My sort of working life had been in the corporate world. When I came to the charitable sector, I'd actually only done about a total of 18 months in the charitable sector when I came on the course. A few months had been somewhere else, and then I moved to my current charity, the Wildlife Trusts, and I'd been there for, I think, about a year when I came across the Bright Spot Mastery course and thought, haha, that's for me.
Yeah, and it was a joy to work with you throughout the programme, even just the little things you were sharing with the rest of the group that you'd been up to since the previous day always piqued my interest, and I always felt were sort of encouraging and helping other people in the room realise these interesting distinctions. Before we get into some of these techniques, because I think you've just found some interesting ways of applying these top line principles, it seems to me you've been doing really well in the last 18 months. Top line, how's the fundraising been going?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really interesting to look at that first year when I came into the charity, and then look again at the year when I did the mastery course. And actually from that first year to that second year, my increase was just over 200%. And I'm really pleased to say that the 18 months since then, things have continued to progress.
Well, huge congratulations, Debbie. Again, you can know all the techniques in the world and nothing much might happen. The beauty of it is you were really interested in these ideas and you went away and tried them. And then, as I say, you often fed back to the group the ones that were working. Probably the most interesting thing for our listeners, though, is what some of those ideas were. What's one thing that you've found especially valuable to focus on in your approach?
Putting 3 major donor actions every morning onto my diary. That was one of the little tips that I learnt, and that made me really focus and it made me really start to add structure to the way I approach things. And it actually made me appreciate the benefit of little things for donors. You don't always have to be approaching a donor with a great big something. You just need to do something small. Linked into that is an example of, I had a young couple who were coming on strong as potential donors. I was starting to have some good online conversations through emails, etc. with them. But of course, like us all, we want to get in front of people to really start making that impact. And this young couple had recently had a baby. So I was congratulating them on the baby and all of that, but then sort of suggesting that we meet. And I got this, the baby, we've got a lot on and we're focusing on the baby and everything else. So I did a bit of research to where in the country they were, identified their house, because obviously I did have their contact address, identified their house and noticed that there was a park exactly opposite. And what I did was I contacted them and said, look guys, it may have been a long time ago for me, but I do remember how tricky it is when you've got a new baby and you can't get out the house far, and every time you go something comes up. So don't stress about coming to meet me, half an hour away. I'll come to the park. I notice there's a little coffee hut. I'll grab us a coffee, bring the baby, and we'll push the baby around the park. And that started that relationship. What started me to think like that was putting that thing on my diary to say 3 major donor actions, because that little thing on my diary just made me just stop, think, what would make a difference to them? Time, convenience. They came to the park. We pushed the baby around. We sat on a bench with a coffee. I told them about the wildlife trusts. I told them about the work. They started talking to me about their specific interests in climate and nature. I'm very, very delighted to say they have been such significant donors that their collective donations have now surpassed 7 figures. And they're young and they are so generous and so committed to supporting going forward. It's fantastic.
I love this example, Debbie. And for the listeners, these ideas may seem kind of obvious to you, but what I have found is that most high-value fundraisers understand that fundraising is about relationships and caring about your supporters and donors as people, rather than sort of seeing them as sort of ATMs or cash machines or what have you. But in practice, it can be quite hard if the signals around you from your colleagues are, could you get some money in? We really need the money. One can potentially inadvertently have the dominant question in one's head, how can I generate some money? Where's the next major gift coming from this week? Whereas on the program, we help people to really see it the more enlightened, generous way, which is good for everybody's motivations as a fundraiser, which is the question, what could I do today to add value to relationships we have with people who care about our cause? Now, that's one thing to ask that question. A way you make it still more practical and likely to happen is this little story, and I won't tell the whole story, but one of my greatest fundraising heroes ever told me that every morning her key principle was to ask herself, what are 3 things I could do which deepen relationships or add value to relationships with people who care? And then crucially, she had the discipline to do those 3 things first. And what I really like about your take on that is you knew that human willpower can be frail. We can get distracted. Maybe we're having an off day. So you went the extra step of making sure in your diary every single morning there's that little pink nudge, 3 major donor actions. And you're as human as the rest of us. I'm guessing that some days a week you don't always manage to follow through on that. But even if, that falls by the wayside a little some days of the week, I can see why you've made so much progress for 18 months, because you are just finding the energy and sometimes the creativity to follow through on those thoughts before most other fundraisers are actually getting to it. And no wonder these relationships have got ever deeper and more positive, and then in some cases more generous. So I really congratulate you on that extra twist you put. And I hope even just that, if our listener even just stopped listening now, that is a thing that, a corporate fundraiser, community fundraiser, major gifts or trust fundraisers could all apply that idea.
Yeah.
It may not be easy to follow through on every single day, but even just to take that idea and see its potential, it really can make such a difference, can't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say it's one of the most important things I took away from the mastery course, because it has really, really transformed the way I start every day, so the way I end up working throughout my day.
Yeah. And to be clear, some of those actions are really not hard to do. It's just a little thank you note. It's just a little extra message or conversation with a colleague as to how we can make a thank you for a supporter, or an event for supporters, that bit better. Lots of them aren't. In fact, the whole point is most of them aren't about asking for money. They're relatively easy things which don't need tons of motivation. It's just that unless we're careful, they end up not getting done. They're easy to do, but they're also easy not to do. And that's why I love your system.
One other thing just to back up on that is that mine says 3 major donor actions a day. I also am a big person for writing things down. So in my notebook, from my daily notebook, before I finish last thing at night, I always do a page of what are the important things for tomorrow. And actually the start of my notebook is always my 3 things. My 3 things might actually become one thing, but it's the point that it's made me really focus and really stop and give the time to that one thing. So I don't kill myself to try and make it 3 every morning. But the point is I do focus, and sometimes it's 3 and sometimes it's more and sometimes it's 1, but it's quite a big one. But the point is it's that real focus, and actually in a funny way it sets you up for the day. It gives you that discipline to get through all the things you need to get through.
Yeah. And I've found that when I do my version of that, weirdly, I mean, it's not perfect, but it does help me stop thinking about work in the evening somewhat, because I know I've captured it. What's another principle or technique that you've found interesting?
What I really found fantastic was that idea of having a separate book to capture stories and to capture really important pieces of information. And actually my book has become my fundraising Bible, let me tell you, because I have taken away from the mastery course the real importance of speaking to people across the organisation, finding out what's happening in their world where they might need funds for whatever they're doing, and writing stories about it in my book, so that I have this metaphorical bookshelf. I have all these stories tucked up in my book on my bookshelf, and I feel it's given me that real edge to be prepared. You did this wonderful 4 steps to how you might present a story, really, all part of storytelling, and the importance of the detail and the way in which you did it. And I think when I sort of went through that and put that in my book, it made me realise that actually every time I put a story into my book, I've got to think about the process. Again, an example was that I'd got somebody who was really interested in rivers, and I'd sort of might have started that story about rivers with them of, we've got this river and we need some money but hang on a minute, row back and think about the steps and think about the impact and think about the action and think about painting the picture. And I remember redoing that story after I'd done those 4 steps in my notebook. And most of my time I'm doing this face to face. A lot of the time I'm not sending it as a proposal. I'm having a meeting and doing it face to face. And so I remember chatting to them and saying, okay, we got to the meeting and I said about the particular river and said, there's massive consequences here if we don't take action. We're talking about huge surges of water. We're talking about flooding. And I talked about the human element and that people have been flooded 3 times in 18 months with 6 feet of water. And I talked about what that was doing to wildlife. And then I told them about the impacts. And then I told them about the actions. And that if simple things happened, and it sounds simple and in real terms it is, but quite a big job. If you re-wiggle a river, so you put some bends in it, it stops that surge of water. It stops those houses being flooded. It stops the impact on wildlife, and it actually benefits wildlife because you're creating wetlands at the side. And I went through all these processes, the impact, the action, etc. And on that particular one, I secured a 6-figure donation for our river work, which was just incredible. But the point is, really going back to what you said, it was having that book, it was thinking about stories. I think the two things to me that are most important in major donor fundraising, absolutely number one, heads and shoulders above anything, is relationships and building those relationships. Once you're at the stage that you're building those relationships, being able to tell a good story accurately, clearly, with impact, with action, is the way forward.
Hey there, brave fundraiser. Now, if you need to increase high value income this year, our Major Gifts Mastery and Corporate Partnerships Mastery programs will absolutely help you do that. To give you a sense of it, here's what Natalie Sweden, who's a philanthropy manager for a UK hospice and who is doing Major Gifts Mastery at the moment, fed back about what it's been like.
I love learning, but it's so practical on this program. You literally can do the things that you've learned the following day or that same day. It makes a genuine difference. I managed to get a win of £38,000 during the course, so I'm excited about that. So I would highly recommend it to anybody interested in joining.
The next programs start in October 2025. All the info is on the training page at brightspotfundraising.co.uk. Thank you for sharing that and that example. On day 2, I think, of the programme, or it might have been day 3, everyone had the chance to share what they'd done since last time. And I'm pretty sure you shared your notebook because it already had 10, 12 pages filled in. Now, I know that some of our listeners are listening thinking, well, you know, for our cause, it's really hard to get examples and so on. Yes. And even when it's hard, now and again you get some opportunities. My question is, are you going to spend that extra 5 minutes to make a note of them and find a way to get the hang of the detail of those so that on the big day when you get a chance to meet the millionaire, you've got that detail? Or are you not? Now, I know that if someone's not on a programme like ours, it's harder.
Yeah, and I think fundraisers also need to understand that if they haven't got the best training in the world, if they haven't got a lot of other input, they've got themselves. And I think that is so, so important. Too often in fundraising, I've seen proposals full of jargon, full of fancy words, full of all, you know, these things to try and, you know, would you please verify, instead of, you know, can I just check with you, or can we just check? And I think one thing that all of us in fundraising can do is we can be ourselves. And we can be ourselves, and then we learn as we go along, but don't lose sight of being yourself, because I think it's a very dangerous thing when somebody thinks they have to fit into a mould of what a fundraiser looks like. I don't have to mould myself to be like somebody else. I just have to have the confidence to be the person I am. And I think the course gives you that confidence to say, it's okay. It's okay if you don't use, you know, this word and that, and you're just very easy in your speech. That's fine. You've got to be comfortable in your skin, and then everything follows, I think.
Yes, these are such wise words, Debbie. And I remember when I was early in my career, I really was trying to fit in. I did worry a great deal about what some of my colleagues thought of me or what my manager thought of me, and that probably did cause me to maybe use more formal language and sometimes overthink things. Of course, paradoxically, a little bit later, the more experience I got, and as I got a bit more confident, then I had the confidence to just be myself more on the phone or in an email or in a meeting. But I agree, the more our listeners can take a deep breath and do their best to nurture that side of themselves and let it out. Instinctively, you probably know that's true. One thing I would encourage our listeners to do is to sort of keep plugging away and allow the real you out when you're having those conversations. Yeah. What else, Debbie? There's so many things we could think about in relationship fundraising, but what's another idea that you tend to practice?
I think another thing that has sort of come about by a bit of default, actually, and actually surprised me in a way the other day. Was I very, very recently, part of learning about fundraising is appreciating, I think, that you're taking somebody on a journey. And the donor, the person, generally, once you've got them engaged with your cause, they want to be taken on that journey and they want to see things sort of from the ground upwards in our case. So part of my role as I start interacting with my donor is to maybe offer them the opportunity to go and see a reserve or to go out and actually see something on the ground that I know will be of interest to them. And I think when we're doing that sort of learning about the journey with the donor, you sort of get that idea that you start to get a feel for perhaps where their level of giving might be. You sort of asking various questions. And I think you very much get into that mode of being able to ask open questions without asking, but you're just sort of leading them in to chat about what they do and how they may have supported in the past. And quite often, a lot of people are very proud to tell you that they donated X to so and so previously. So you focus on the where they donated to say what a fantastic cause it is, etc., etc. But the point is you're actually logging the amount that they gave. So you're starting to build a picture of what their capacity may be for giving. And these are all things that I think you learn on the journey with your training. And recently I took somebody on a visit to a reserve. We've got a very large project underway and we did the walking around, the walk and the talk, and I had a land director with me and all really good stuff. And by the end of the time with them, very much got the feeling that maybe, and I'm going to say a figure here, I thought maybe they might have been on a 50 grander. And I definitely got the feeling that this particular person wanted to really be a key supporter, part of it, involved in it. How could they help? They'd already mentioned supporting on social media. They'd mentioned all sorts of things. And I thought, interestingly, they want to really feel like they're part of this. So when I followed up after the meeting, I sent the usual, thank you so much, great to see you, I'm glad you enjoyed it, all the usual in the email. And then I said, just one other thing. I just wanted to let you know, I'm just launching a gifting circle for this project specifically. It's quite a big target on this project, so there's various levels are quite high. But the entry level is £100,000. Obviously didn't say this is the entry level. I just said I've attached a document which shows the gifting circle. You might be interested to take a look, and left it at that. Now the entry level was 100,000. I thought she was probably thinking 50,000. I sent that off and a couple of days later she called and she said, fantastic, thank you so much, we loved it, we were thrilled with the project, blah 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 blah, we've had a chat about it, we'd love to join the gifting circle. Oh, it'd be fantastic, and to be able to meet the CEO and to come again to the when you do X things in here, but we're not in the, because it did go up to millions, we're not in the millions bracket, but could we give you £100,000 and join? Just like bingo. Actually, that was exactly what I hoped that might do, and it did. And I don't think I realised that impact, I didn't think about it, apart from the fact that previously I'd been looking back at something, and I'd been looking back in my good old book, my first book that I bought to my mastery programme, and we talked about the donor journey and we talked about engaging, and there was various little bits of notes of things, and it said something about framing things, and I thought to myself, oh yeah, I could mention about at this point that could tip her to the next stage. And that's what I believe happened on that one. So I think it's that thinking out the box thing. It's not just rushing something off, it's stopping and thinking and really thinking about it, and then getting to the stage of thinking, that one thing could make a difference.
Hey, it's Rob, and just before we get to the last bit of my chat with Debbie, I've got a question for you. Do you find these podcasts, and for example, my virtual breakfast club for fundraising leaders, helpful? If so, the training we provide would help you at a whole different level in terms of both the techniques you learn and also the lift these Bright Spot courses give to your confidence and to your momentum. Whether you need to help your whole fundraising team through a training day, or you especially want to transform major gifts or corporate partnerships income through one of our famous mastery programs on those two topics, please do get in touch to request a chat. All the info is at brightspotfundraising.co.uk on the training page. I look forward to hearing from you. Thanks, Debbie. Another great example and a reminder really of us pausing and really caring about our supporters and those who could care about our cause, caring about them, trying to understand them as best they can. There are many reasons why someone might want to give or get involved in supporting a charitable cause. Obviously, there's the purely philanthropic one, but for some people, other things are important too, like being involved in that way. And this is really quite obvious in a way for experienced fundraisers, but it's a great reminder for us always to pay attention. And that proposal you sent would have been different to a different type of donor. So thanks for sharing that to help us get a sense of these different emotional needs that giving to charity can meet. We don't have loads of time left. Maybe in the time remaining, you just have any top tips that you would have found helpful a couple of years ago when you started?
Yeah, I think tips really for a fundraiser. We did touch on this one earlier, but I think listening is really, really key. Don't get carried away with filling the gaps. If you ask a question of somebody, be prepared to just sit back and wait. Don't feel the need to jump in because they can take time to respond. And if you quickly fill in for them or try and answer for them, you've lost what they might be going to say to you. And certainly listening, really listening, not just superficially, really listening and trying to get an understanding of what they're saying to you is a real tip. Being yourself is the other tip that we talked about, but also being persistent, not giving up at the first base. If you contact somebody and you send them an email, great. If you don't get the response you want and you might email again and you don't get the response again, then pick up the phone, have a chat. You will be amazed the amount of people who are almost a bit nervous these days of picking up a phone. But generally, if you pick up the phone and they are already aware of your cause, so they're not going to be horrified by me saying, "Hi, it's Debbie calling from the Wildlife Trust. Just thought I would give you a quick call." I could throw in a really quick example here of how being bold sometimes works. And we hosted a garden for the first time at RHS Chelsea. I was on the garden all week. It was very, very chaotic. On one of the days at Chelsea, they have what they call their celebrity day, I think, or their VIP day. I'd gone off to grab a cup of tea to take a breather for 10 minutes. And as I was walking back, I probably won't name him, but a very well-known musical artist was sitting on a bench. And I thought, oh, interesting. So I went up to him and I said, "Hello, I'm Debbie from the Wildlife Trust." And he was sitting down and I was standing up and he looked up and he said, "Hello, Debbie." And I said, "Look, I'm really sorry to bother you on what is probably a lovely day out with your guest here." He introduced me to his daughter. I said, "I understand that you had quite an interest in environmental blah, 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 blah." Started a conversation with him. We chatted for about 10 minutes and he handed me his phone and said, "Put your contact details into my phone." I have to say, I was a little taken aback, but I very quickly put my contact details into his phone. I then said to him, "If you have time, our garden is just round the corner on the right. I'd love to show you the garden." 2 hours went by and I thought, And then who turned up? I was talking to somebody else. One of my colleagues tapped me and said, "Oh, my goodness, so-and-so's here to see you." I greeted him and his daughter, took them directly onto the garden as opposed to the edge at Chelsea. You can take special guests on. Took him onto the garden. He stayed on the garden with me for about quarter of an hour, asking a lot of very intelligent questions. We had a really, really good chat, and he then literally left. Half an hour later, my phone pinged and he said, "Now we're connected, let's keep in touch." That is an ongoing, really exciting conversation. We're getting a lot of questions over a lot of our work and a lot of detail. I am really hopeful that will come to something. But you know what? That happened because of persistence, really. That happened because of not being concerned about thinking, if I go up, he might tell me to, no, not interested. Just be bold. Pick up the phone. The worst they can do is say, "I'm really sorry, I haven't got time," and put the phone down. And since coming on the mastery course, because of the figures that I have been able to achieve, it's enabled us to expand our team here. One of my colleagues who has joined the team has also just recently taken part in the mastery course. He's coming to the end of his time on it. He's loved it, but importantly, he's also benefited from the learnings and that persistence of emailing, not getting a response. He picked up the phone. He's had his first six-figure donation. He has done a sterling job. And a lot of that, when I speak to him and say, "How do you feel you've got on the mastery course?" he feels like his learnings has shot his ability up by a mile, because it's given him the confidence to keep going, to pick up the phone and to do those things which really do get results.
Yeah, I love this example, Debbie. I remember years ago reading in a book, and it resonated with me so much I wrote it down. It said, "He or she who hesitates waits and waits and waits." And it really pained me to think of various times in my life up to that point where I talked myself out of doing the thing that really just made sense to do. Obviously, the key thing is if one wants to go up to that VIP or major donor, and the question is, what can I get from them? Then understandably one feels nervous. But if one is really conscious of, we're not trying to get, we're trying to add value to people who care about our cause and want to make the world a better place in this way. If that's your reason for having conversations, it becomes easier to be brave, and we're less likely to hesitate. And it goes together with a thing I was taught called the 20-second rule, which is if you see someone who really it would make sense for you to have a conversation with, by all means pause and gather yourself, but don't let more than 20 seconds go by, because otherwise, if you're human, it's highly likely you'll talk yourself out of all the good reasons for doing it and all the upside, because you'll be focusing on all the what ifs of if it goes wrong. So those two ideas, again, it's not true that I'm always brave in these situations, but certainly those two ideas have helped me. And I love your example. I hope just today, tomorrow, some of our listeners might remember that little example you shared. But time is against us. You've shared so many good examples. I'd love to talk on and on, but there isn't time in the podcast format. I will continue to watch your career and enjoy your wins and continue to learn from you. So thank you for all the things you've been sharing with me. Thank you for your time today to help lots of fundraisers out there. I hope they will find it as interesting and helpful as I have. But for now, Debbie, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you so much for asking me. It's been an absolute pleasure.
That's all, folks. Thank you so much for listening and for supporting the Fundraising Bright Spots show. If you liked it, I'd be incredibly grateful if you'd help spread the word and help other good causes out there by sharing it on LinkedIn and with your colleagues. I wish you the very best of luck with your fundraising today, and I look forward to sharing more Bright Spot stories with you very soon.